Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope we all learned a lot today about the VODAN network. I'm myself really interested in knowing more. I introduce quickly myself. I'm Ana Garcia. I'm the Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association, and I would like to welcome all our distinguished speakers. You can see them all in the slides, and so thank you for being with us today. Also, I would like to share the agenda. I think you all have already had the opportunity to check the agenda and to see the different topics that we will be looking at today. And not to take more time, I would like to already introduce the first speakers, but before, a note for all the participants: you have the possibility to ask questions, and there is a control panel, but for some people that control panel is not directly presented. You need to click a red arrow on the right side of your screen, then the red panel will pop up, and then you can ask questions. And now I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Milan Petkovic. I have to say is Vice President of BDVA, so I would like to mention that first, as he's one of our Vice Presidents, but also he's Department Head of Data Science at Philips and Professor at the Technical University of Eindhoven. Welcome, Milan.
Thank you, Anna. So good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to BDVA COVID-19 webinar on VODAN, Virus Outbreak Data Network. As Anna said, I'm Vice President of BDVA Association, which is an association of around 200 members with a mixed membership from industry, research institutes, and universities. We collaborate as BDVA with the European Commission on data public-private partnership, since recently also on Euro HPC and in future AI PPP. As Anna said, I'm also department head, and basically in BDVA I'm representing Philips. In Philips I lead data science department. This crisis actually is difficult, but it opens a lot of opportunities. And as I said, it's my pleasure to basically welcome you to this webinar, which is on this topic. We are in the middle, I guess, of this COVID-19 crisis, and the importance of data for managing such a crisis as COVID-19 is becoming apparent to everyone. Today we have several great speakers who will explain how data can help, and in particular talk about VODAN, which is a virus outbreak data network, as well as several related initiatives and the role of data and the data requirements that need to be fulfilled to be actually useful for managing such a crisis. First, we'll start with Professor Barend Mons, who is from Leiden University Medical Center. Professor Mons is by training a molecular biologist, but now very much known for his involvement in FAIR initiative. In the past, he spent time on fundamental research, malaria, translational research for malaria vaccines, so things related to also could be related to what we have now. But already 20 years ago, he also started being involving in data stewardship and analytics. As I said, he is currently a professor in Leiden since 2012 in biosemantics in the Department of Human Genetics at LUMC, but he is also involved in many different initiatives. He is involved in Open Science Cloud, European Open Science Cloud, also GoFair, a topic that basically he will start with today. He is also president of CODATA. So today he will first introduce briefly GoFair, and then he would move to the main topic of this webinar, which is the VODAN Virus Outbreak Data Network. Professor Mons, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Anna, can you give me the presentation mode?
I think you already have it.
Okay, do you see my screen? I don't think so. Let me see.
I try.
Yeah.
Now perfect. Yeah,
Now
perfect.
Yeah?
perfect.
Okay, so we will first, thank you very much for inviting me. We had a meeting not so long ago already with BVDA, and I think this is more or less a follow-up. So I will explain first very briefly CoFair, but really very briefly, because everything is online and people can go for it and look at the website. So CoFair is an initiative that stands for Global Open Fair, and it started about 2.5 years ago when the European Open Science Cloud was envisioned, and Germany, France, and the Netherlands said, let's start now with the things that need to be done anyway. We knew a lot had to change. Many people had to be trained, and we had to build some stuff. So we started with a basic concept of implementation networks. And here you will see all the implementation networks, and VODAN, which we will discuss mainly today, is one of those implementation networks. And the offices in Germany, the Netherlands, and France are just there to support the implementation networks. And we think that by the time that the EOSC is really up and running later this year, part of what we do with GoFair will sublimate, as it were, into the new legal entity of the European Open Science Cloud. And originally, we even thought we could stop GoFair then, but now we have offices all around the world and people are spread around the world. So basically, GoFair will probably continue under the GoFair Foundation as long as implementation networks need it. So if you go to the implementation networks, and now we can go to VODAN. VODAN is just one of them. Here you see the page of the VODAN network. And what you can see here is, first of all, that we now work very strongly together with CODATA, the Committee on Data of the International Science Council, of which I happen to be president at this point in time. Oops, sorry, let's go back here. There is a mistake here. Sorry. Let's go back to VODAN. Okay. So, and then there is the Research Data Alliance, which has now been asked by the European Commission to write a recommendation for the data handling in COVID-19, and it is 100% in line with the FAIR principles. You can read it. It's beautiful. We have GoFair and the World Data System. And what is important for everyone to read, if you want to read more, is this common statement. So the 4 organizations have made this statement, and this is a very important one, I think, because it shows the boundary conditions under which we can share data for a pandemic such as the COVID-19 pandemic. What you can see here is that we also have this alternative explanation of FAIR, which hopefully everybody knows by now stands officially for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reusable by Machines. But the Americans came up with a very nice alternative expression, Federated AI Ready Data. So they are ready for AI, and this is why in the Netherlands, based on COVID use case, TNO is now building an infrastructure that is really based on this idea. The personal health train is a system whereby data stay in the FAIR data station in their own position wherever they were generated. And Miriam will say undoubtedly a few things about Africa here, but the data on COVID are very sensitive, not only GDPR-wise and persons, but also now highly politicized, as we all know. You know, the fight between the Americans and the Chinese and everything. So there's no way that personal data, real-world observations, will be shared in a central data warehouse. So we need to visit those data in a distributed way with algorithms that are here called trains, And we have the personal health train, the farm data train, but of course in here we talk mostly about the personal health train. And as you can see, that is just another, also a other in implementation network in GoFair. Maybe it's good to break and have people asking any questions that are immediately important about GoFair before we move to VODAN, which is the main chunk of what I wanted to tell you. So maybe a little break for questions, or should I go on, Anna? You tell me.
I think you can pass already to VODAN, and then if there are questions, there are no questions so far, we can go back to the GoFair part.
So then let me go to, this was the page again, and you see that we work together mostly with two other major implementation networks in GoFair, which is the personal health train, you just saw it, but also we have data stewardship competence centers. So what you see more and more, that also funders that will fund work on COVID-19 will request that the data that come out are immediately fair. And I decided to give you some very, very recent information. I pasted a link in the chat to an article that we will publish today, which might have quite some impact. So you can see that GoFair is also working among the implementation networks on convergence. Now, one of the things we are doing at the moment, this is one of the many projects in under VODAN that is starting. Another one will be introduced by Miriam, I suppose, which is co-funded by the Philips Foundation and ZonMW, which is to get fair data points and later fair data stations, full-blown, in as many places as possible, also in Africa and other countries, other regions, where we can visit the data. And I will show you at the second half of the presentation why that is so incredibly important and almost impossible at the moment. So there is, of course, now a lot of crap published as well about COVID. We will not only mention chloroquine, but then later also bleach and Dettol. And don't underestimate that. I spoke to a CEO of a company in Switzerland yesterday, and he told me that his wife went to the shops yesterday and there was no bleach and no Dettol left. Imagine. So all this crap that comes out, in addition to, you know, the scientific literature, will be text mined, but also COVID apps like COVID Radar and the case report forms from WHO are already in this project co-funded by the Philips Foundation, are made into RDF, which is a machine readable format, and it will actually become part of a big data environment, and I will show you some stuff later. It will be checked for correct mining by students, but they are not yet saying whether the assertion like chloroquine can treat COVID or any other drug is true or not. They just say it was correctly mined from the source. This is what the text said, because as you know, text in itself before text mining is not machine readable. So then those new assertions, and I will show you more about that later, go to this black room, which could be a Zoom or a GoToMeeting room. We use Zoom. And we can then have subscribed professionals with their ORCID. So we know their publications, we know how credible they are, and they can judge the statements about drug repurposing or immunology or anything. And only that vetted information will be visualized. And this is partly by the company I spoke to yesterday, Frontiers in Switzerland, that I had the anecdotal evidence from. And finally, it will be visualized to support, you know, our IVM in the Netherlands, but also the Fauci group and the Ursula von der Leyen group, so that they know that they are not looking at some wild guesses. And to give you one example, I was talking yesterday night late to a very important person, I won't mention names here, and he said that somebody said that estradiol was probably the reason that males are much more susceptible to severe disease in COVID than women. And he said, but a friend of mine immediately dismissed that and he wrote a letter about it. And we added the thing to our big data environment and he had to retract. I said, oh, no, maybe this is really a very important thing to deal with. So we can really check fair questions and answers to the tool that I will show you in a minute. This is just one of the projects. There are many others. And the other thing that the Frontiers company will do in a cluster in VODAN will make a website where all the funding opportunities are for COVID are collected on a regional basis, and the projects that people want to get funded are matched, and they will be a dating site between projects and funders. So as you can see, VODAN grew very fast in the first few weeks, and now of course it stabilizes because most people that really want to do something, with fair data are in, and that's why we had to put the clusters. Here you see the clusters. So yeah, we have the hardcore e-infra, mainly now taken care of by Fraunhofer and TNO and Geant and so on, with our CTO of CoFair in the middle. We have data stewardship, community annotation, conceptual modeling, but also new publications. We will meet actually with this cluster in the afternoon and see how we mine them and make fair digital abstracts and add them to the big data mix. I will explain in a minute. And then we have some overarching clusters like advice and overview and international support and coordination office. UNESCO has been asked by 120 countries, including 77 of them sending their minister, to form a international COVID data exchange platform. And the European Commission has asked that as well. And I've written a letter as president of CODATA to UNESCO that, we'll take care of that with RDA, WDS, CODATA, CoFair, and many others. Summary, and then we go to some substance. I was crazy enough actually to say I can be the coordinator, and then the article that I will discuss with you came up, and I'm totally overworked, but we will be looking for a coordinator. And if this was CODAN and not VODAN, so it was only for COVID and not for viruses in general or any outbreak in the future, I would be optimistically saying that we may not need a coordinator in a few months from now, because I think we are on our way to master the COVID epidemic. But that's wishful thinking, and also I will give you some evidence. But this is not just for COVID. This is to be much better prepared in the future, so that as soon as the outbreak comes, we can share data in the sense of visiting them and have computers assisting us to find out patterns, like why are people losing their taste and those kind of things and so on. Now, I will give you some evidence why VODAN is so important. So what we did recently, and this is all now mainly work by hand, because we cannot yet visit the data, not because it's technically impossible. The personnel train is working, at least at the professorware level, and it is now extended by TNO and companies to scalability, but it's the old system. So we used 3 major real-world observation papers. I will show you more about that in a minute. And they are looking at CT scans of people that died and at the interleukin levels of people. And we made them fair, and we used them together with a Euretos platform with 275 machine-readable databases already there, including Medline and the whole bunch of UniProt to Human Protein Atlas and so on. So it's the most comprehensive set I know of all integrated biomedical literature. And then on the right-hand side, we add hypotheses, like we took the 26 predicted proteins of the virus, the new virus, which is published, how they interact potentially with the human proteome, that's 332 proteins, how that relates to the receptor that the virus uses to get into the cell, the idea that the virus actually induces a cytokine storm that is not new anymore, that's in several publications. We have added to that the cytokine release syndrome that is preceding the cytokine storm, and more people now agree that the virus actually disturbs this system, the renin-angiotensin system. That's biology, so forget it. And you can add any further hypothesis. Then we can have experts looking at it, and we create what we call the greatest common denominator connectome of all concepts that are mentioned in any of those articles. Then we create a disease model, and I deliberately put this in a petri dish because it's basically like you test drugs in a petri dish. You now test them on a disease model in silico, and you can test any drug you want, but also other interventions. And you can even say, and if we have time later, I can show you how that works. Why do people lose their taste? You know, that's a strange symptom that is new to COVID. So if you take that sort of big data system and you type ACE2, the receptor of the virus, that the virus mainly uses to get it to the cell, you see this is the connectome of all diseases that are mentioned in the literature with this protein. And if you look quickly, you will see all the typical comorbidities that elderly people die from, or that have comorbidity with people that end up in the intensive care. So that is a reasonable indication. Then a few days ago, this paper came out where they looked at the CT scans of all the people. This took 2 months before we could get enough to make this picture. If we could have visited those CT scans in the hospitals, in China, in Iran, in Italy, early days, this picture could have been there 2 months earlier, okay? Then we made the disease model, and I will first show you this one. We said, okay, what happens is in the lung and heart, brain, kidney, what is observed by clinicians is, of course, that people start to be sick a little bit, and they get arrhythmia, tachycardia, nausea, dyspnea, shortness of breath, headache, etc. Typical symptoms of the early virus, which are 100% the cytokine syndrome related symptoms. Then you get vasculitis, so your microvascular system is getting inflamed because of macrophage activation, blah, blah, blah. Then you get diffuse of damage in your lungs, and your capillaries start to leak. Then you get venous thrombosis, and you start to leak more. And finally, you end up having organized pneumonia. It's not visible that there is acute respiratory syndrome, as most publications say. It's really pulmonary embolism. And at a recent autopsy, people said that the lungs of the patient were 2 to 3 times heavier than normal. So you basically drown in your own lymph and blood. If it is manifested in your heart, you get heart failure, stroke, or acute renal failure, and then the generic systems here. We have added the genes to it, and you see a lot of genes are involved before ACE2 even shows up in the timeline here. So the cytokines release syndrome is induced by many other genes. All these genes, proteins, interact with the viral proteome. They are human proteins. So the virus interacts strongly with these 3 proteins, and they start already the process. And only here, when the virus starts to grow fast, ACE and ACE2 also come in, and you disturb this whole system that we said before. If you do that in big data, this is what you can see. So here you see the symptoms and where the genes begin, how they all relate in 275 databases. We remove the predicates here, but there is thousands of predicates, inhibits, controls transcription of, etc. And now we can divide the disease of COVID in 5 phases. And then deliberately, we took this model, and we didn't do a single drug here, but I added yesterday in 10 minutes all the drugs that have been listed in Wikidata to be tested at the moment already for COVID. And you see that all the ones that end at VER are the typical drugs that try to kill the virus. They are very sparsely connected because we are looking at a very downstream thing that is not caused directly by the virus. The virus disturbs the homeostasis of the person. But you see that many drugs have extremely high connections, and we can now analyze how strongly they are connected to different lists of genes here. And that will determine whether you give, for example, tocilizumab from Roche in the beginning of the disease, because it is inhibiting IL-6 and it can prevent the cytokine storm. But you already know if you give that here, if the patient is already entering the intensive care, it makes no sense whatsoever, according to the model, to give this antibody. But other drugs really position themselves much later in the disease and can be tested here. So this is what we will publish today. Forget the biology. The important thing for VODAN, and that's why I end and you can ask questions, is that if all data would have been fair and distributed and visitable in January, this picture would have emerged early February. And we could have saved a lot of lives. That's my VODAN story.
Thank you, Bernd. Thank you, Professor Mons. I invite participants to post your questions in the tool in the control panel, and in that way we can give the floor to our next speaker. And I guess Milan, you would like to present our next speaker.
Sure. So while maybe people would type questions, I would like to introduce our next speaker. I'm very happy to invite Professor Mirjam van Rijzen, who is affiliated with both Tilburg and Leiden University. She is a professor of international relations, innovation and care at Tilburg, as well as professor of computing for society at Leiden Center for Data Science at University of Leiden. Professor van Rijzen is also a founding director of European External Policy Advisors in Brussels.
I lost Milan. Is that me only?
Yeah, me too.
Yes. I was breaking.
We lost you for a few minutes, a few seconds. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry. Professor van Rijzen will be joined by a colleague of mine, Hans Hofstad, who is Vice President and Innovation Program Manager at Philips Research. And they will tell us about a VODAN case in which Philips Foundation is involved. I'm not sure, Anna, are there any questions for Bernd, or shall we move to then immediately to Mirjam and to Mirjam van Rijzen and Hans Hofstad?
I don't see any questions yet, so I think let's move on, and I think the questions will come up a bit later.
Thank you, Milan. Thank you, Anna. I'll start my presentation now. Can I just ascertain that the volume is fine?
Yeah, it's all fine. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm here speaking, among others, in my capacity as one of the chairpersons of the Philips Foundation, and this project has been developed together with the GoFair and VODAN team that Bernd was just introducing, and Philips Foundation and the universities of Leiden and Tilburg. So what I would like to talk today about is what does it mean for the practical implementation of the of organizing the data interoperability, and this is the work that I've been working on in the last 2 months. I'll first like to say something about the Philips Foundation, how this project is positioned in the overarching COVID-19 response, and then I will introduce the Virus Outbreak Data Network as we have established it, with a particular focus on implementation in Africa and other parts of the world. And then I will briefly, I've got a lot of slides, but I will concentrate on a few elements of the training element of that and some of the next steps as we are looking at the future. So for us at Philips Foundation, we felt that the COVID-19 pandemic is so overarching and overwhelming that we really needed to have an intensive response to that. And here you see some of the programs that we have been supporting. And here you see a list of initiatives that we are supporting at this moment. Anna, I will be distributing the slides for anybody who would like to see them. I'm not going into the detail here now. But the Philips Foundation response has to be seen in the context of the overwhelming crisis as we are seeing it today, obviously in China, Europe, the United States, but we also see an enormity of the crisis in Africa, and that focuses on a few important things. First of all, the undetected infection and spread that in fact today, as we speak, we're not really very clear about the real impact of COVID-19 today in Africa, and therefore we know little as to what we can expect in terms of how that will develop. And that goes together with serious food shortages and the threat of famine, a serious economic downturn and potential collapse, certainly in certain countries, which then has impacted in the past and is impacting as we speak in an underinvestment in healthcare. And that goes together with a lack and increasing lack of disposable income, and many people are dependent on disposable income to access healthcare. So it's a very grim picture to which we are speaking. And then going to the next slide, we've been trying to see where also some of the opportunities are. And if we look at opportunities that are presented in this crisis, then first of all, there is an incredible window of opportunity for digital connectivity. And we have seen that already in the responses, that some of the difficulties that pose themselves today are actually resolved by Digital Connect. And this is also the case in Africa, which has a very large youth population and therefore an incredible potential for entrepreneurship and innovation. And COVID-19 also puts in all of this health at the center. So at the Philips Foundation, we have sought to come up with a comprehensive approach that carries those opportunities further. So at the moment, the project that I'm presenting, the Virus Outbreak Data Network Africa, has been supported by the Philips Foundation as a way of ensuring that all of these initiatives are connected with a strong data component. And I think having just heard Barend, it goes without doubt that data are at the center of what is needed to manage this crisis. And the coordinating group exists of a number of universities, all of whom are pretty important to really give a science-based and evidence-based view on how this crisis is unfolding itself. At the moment, we have a solid representation from Kampala International University, who is coordinating this initiative, the Tangaza University College, but working with many hospitals across Kenya, Great Zimbabwe University, Addis Ababa University, Mekelle University, the Olabasi Onabanjo University in Nigeria, together with the group Data Science, and the University of Sousse in Tunisia. And we're speaking at the moment also with new groups in South Africa and Rwanda who've expressed interest to join. And this in support with Ravelworks, an innovation and training group in Kenya, and the San Diego Center for Supercomputing, together, of course, with Philips Foundation, Leiden University, and Go Fair Foundation. The objectives here are really to make sure that digital data are produced and digital data are interconnected. And for this, it is very important that we include science institutions, because of the importance to make sense out of the data and to also understand the importance of those data for further knowledge development. The universities that I have just mentioned, they all have a very strong connect. Many of them also have a university hospital and therefore direct access into the health and patient data. And we have also sought a very strong connect with ministries of health, because we believe that we can build the strongest capacity if we have a interest and buy-in from government. And so the purpose of this is really to make sure that we have different sources of data that can help us understand better a series of questions. And these data concern the patient data, obviously without the personal information, research data and published articles. At the moment, actually, the resource of COVID articles is 50,000 of scholarly articles. And all of this is obviously too much to handle manually. And this is the reason why FAIR is needed to create machine readable and AI ready solutions. Well, this is the presentation of FAIR, but I'm going to leave that for now. But important here is that the data allows computing through tooling. But at the start of this, what is incredibly relevant is that the data have high quality and that the data are also representative. We know that from much of the literature, for instance, data from Africa are lacking in medical analysis. And also the issue of data with little quality or even fake data is an issue. And it's obvious that if you can trace data to the source, to the place of origin, that the information of that provenance allows much more information about the quality of the data and how those data were produced, and therefore also are a good buffer against fake data. Specific benefits of VODAN for Africa are especially the experience in Africa that data are removed from places into general warehouses and that the information actually rarely comes back, an experience that was painfully illustrated by the Ebola crisis a few years ago in 2014. And so we have actually found that as we have moved forward with this joint program, that in Africa there's a lot of understanding as to why data kept in residence really is the way forward for Africa, and therefore the buy-in has been surprisingly large, and which means that with the training for trainers program, we are in a way now leapfrogging as we see that there is a serious uptake from Africa. We had a first training yesterday, and we had 44 almost complete group of data stewards and coordinators on the digital Zoom training. I'm not going here into the detail. I'd like to make sure that Hans has enough time and that we can also take questions. Just to say here that in the implementation, it's really critical that we build solid networks of trust and purpose. And again, therefore, it is important that the stewardship of the data, the data curation is solidly enshrined within the existing regulatory frameworks. We've paid a lot of attention to that and made sure that data stewards work interdisciplinarily with the ministries and also the hospital regulatory frameworks, university regulatory frameworks, and really any regulatory framework that is relevant to their situation as they see it defined. So within a corporate context, this should also include corporate regulatory context. So we have asked them to carry out that research, compile information flow charts, understand the information flows, And that leads us now to an analysis of the key needs to build these communities that can help establish both the fair data points and the data that can point to these. For next steps, the work is really divided in two parts. One is the technical specifics, which is very much facilitated by the GoFair International Coordination Office. And the second part is really the contextualized data, which need to point to the fair data points. And these are really, they need to be curated at the local level. This is the different kind of capacities that need to come together. So in VODAN, we have usually a duo of a health worker or health administrator or director of a hospital working together with the computer science department, which then manages the data steward, so that these elements come together. Here you see, again, in this picture, the relationship between the localized work and the generic work, the technical work of the fair data points. So tomorrow, as you see on the 30th of April, we'll install 6 data points in those 6 countries. And in parallel to that, the data stewards are now preparing the metadata for machines. With that, we can assure that the data are curated both in relation to ethical principles and regulatory relevant frameworks in context, and that these data can feed the algorithmic tools. What is still very much important and tasks to do is to make sure that the auditing of the fair data points and the auditing of the tools is also in place, so that these are also trusted mechanisms. So here are then the key links to the VODAN project and some of the key names if you would be interested to contact us. And with that, thank you for your attention, and would like to hand over to Hans.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Milan, I don't know whether you want to introduce next speaker.
Sure. I already mentioned Hans is Vice President at Philips Research, and he's also Innovation Program Manager looking at several domains in healthcare. He was also a part-time professor at University of Amsterdam in the past, and was also working for different companies. Given the time, I would say let's give the floor to Hans, and let's maybe address some questions towards the end.
Adi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Very good. Getting a little bit. Yeah. Okay, I'm already going to the next slide. So what I will do is basically follow up on the excellent introduction by Miriam, and not go into too many details, but just show how we intend to take the next step from the excellent work that the VODAN, the Philips Foundation, leveraging the fair data principles, and how it can be leveraged to take advantage of the digital information to address the COVID-19 crisis, particularly focusing on the resource-limited settings. And in terms of the commitment that we have in Philips, basically this fits in our ambition to improve access to care to 400 million lives in underserved countries in the coming decade. And there, of course, with the present and very urgent COVID crisis that is also hitting Africa, India, and other countries, it is really essential that these solutions that can be made available also will be available in a sustainable way. And that means that we need to take the good work that has just been presented and the initiatives and make them available to community healthcare workers, to the primary care organizations, as well as to the healthcare system in countries across the world, and really making available the solutions so that they can be implemented and will be implemented. Basically, what this means is that, and that is the basic challenge that many of these countries have, is really to bring solutions to the community. The problems, the COVID situation, actually all the viral outbreaks, they do start in the community. And of course, a lot of focus is on tertiary care, very advanced care at the moment, of course, with the need for appropriate ventilation, etc., to take care of the critically ill. But the starting point very much is in the community and in primary care. And basically what we aim to do is to bridge these different settings, these different levels of care, and to bring knowledge and information and know-how to the community healthcare workers, and make these connections through the solutions that we can provide. And for COVID-19, as for other infectious diseases, but also for many other healthcare problems, really to build that bridge is a crucial element to be covered. And digital plays a key role in that. What I'm showing here is the solution that we're building for mother and child care, basically around pregnancy, birth and follow-up, which we call the MOM solution, the maternal obstetrical monitoring solution, where really we have a combination of an application for caregivers, which includes the community healthcare worker, the midwife, the doctor if needed. So basically bridging the community with the professional care provision, including particularly the primary care, having applications for the patient, in this case the pregnant mother, the pregnant woman, and supporting by digital solutions through a special web portal where information is maintained. And so this software solution, this digital solution, has a web portal, a patient app, and a caregiver app, which basically are the core elements that also are required in terms of addressing the needs in the present COVID-19 challenge. And this is, of course, what we intend to leverage, of course, taking advantage of the good work to make data available, and of course also contributing fair data to the VODAN network. As we speak, we are already developing a number of applications, particularly also to bring diagnosis and do screening close to people, where a very important role is played by ultrasound. Of course, ultrasound very accessible also in resource limited settings. Of course, CT may be better, but a very complex instrument which requires a high degree of training. At the moment, of course, we are already developing ultrasound for the pregnancy application. And it means that community healthcare workers are being trained as well in the use of ultrasound in terms of identifying women at risk at home. And obviously this can be then also done for the diagnosis of the corona infection. This then will be part of a portable outreach kit for COVID-19, which is basically based on the backpack that we already developed for the maternal obstetric monitoring application, and that therefore can also be made available to address COVID-19 where it matters, that is in the community and close to the people. And then on top of that, we're developing a number of touchless applications, not only on ultrasound, but also others that can be applied in remote locations at primary care, also to deliver high quality of diagnosis, care, prevention and treatment in the resource limited settings that urgently are in need of those. And of course, all of that is supported by digital solutions for remote access and driving prevention and management of the disease. Obviously, fast, automated, safe and affordable, very important, of course, for these settings, triaging and screening, and obviously through the leveraging of digital healthcare solutions and digital health and education solutions, enabling high speed of adoption of the latest insights and approaches to cover the crisis that we are in at the moment. And therefore, extremely important, and then coming back and closing the circle to the presentation of Miriam, very important to be working together between Philips, the Philips Foundation, which is actually an independent foundation from Philips operating autonomously, reaching out to all kinds of other organizations in the Digital Connected Care Coalition, really opening up and enabling addressing the COVID crisis globally throughout the world by leveraging fair and reusable and accessible data. With that, I hope I've given a little bit of a perspective how the previous presentation, coming particularly out of the VODAN initiative and the Philips Foundation, will end up in solutions that we will make available, and not only we, but also other companies that are working together, other organizations that are contributing in parts of the Digital Connected Care Coalition to make sure that we get to the results and the solutions that we are all needing. And I hope that gives a little bit of a perspective. Thanks a lot, and I'll give back the floor to Anna and Milan. Looking forward to dialogue and questions.
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you to all speakers for very informative presentations. Anna, are there any questions to the speaker? Yes. Okay.
There are some questions, so I will ask these questions aloud, and then in the meantime, if there are more questions, I invite the participants to post them in the chat. First one, I guess, is mainly for Professor Mons. Is there any relation between the VODAN COVID fair data definitions and those in other COVID data initiatives like OHDSI or I2B2? We cannot hear you, Barend. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I was still muted. So let me mainly respond to the first one, which we explain as already pronounced as Odyssey. There, the pharma, for example, works mostly with the OMO model. And in the academia, we usually work with FIRE and other models. So one of the things VODAN is doing, not in the first project funded by the Philips Foundation and ZonMB, but later on, is make a higher level conceptual model of the whole virus, as I showed you a little bit. And then it becomes very easy to take data that were registered in any kind of particular model, as long as it is machine readable in itself, and translate them into another model without loss of information. So in that sense, the Fair Digital Object Framework that we discussed in our previous call with BDVA is comparable to the TCP/IP level in the internet. So you can build anything you want, trains and stations and rails, and as long as you stick to this very minimal standard, that every digital object that the machine encounters, it can understand. That's a fair digital object. So the machine knows what it is, the type, what it can do with it technically, and what is the license on it. This is trillions of fair digital objects, but that's not a problem for machines. So yes, we can interconnect with all these other initiatives as long as they stick to the FAIR principles. because FAIR doesn't say anything about the particular implementation, OMOP, FIRE, ICHOM, which models you use for your data model, because they become interoperable if the machine understands them. Is that an answer to the question? I hope it is.
Okay, there is a second question. Thank you. Okay, there is a second question. Thank you. I think.
But actually, let me say one more thing. We work, but we also work directly with the ODC people. I forgot to say that.
Barend, I need you to mute yourself while I speak, because there is a lot of echo. I have a second question. This one is also for you and also for Professor Van Rysel. Is what are the open data models and vocabularies that have currently been used to represent COVID-19 data in accordance to FAIR principles?
Okay, I think I should first answer that. The details can be found via Eric Schultes. He was on one of the slides. So we do that in the GoFair according to so-called FAIR implementation profiles, which in themselves are again machine-readable files. And in the first exercise that was financed by the Philips Foundation and Zonneweg in this first project, we made an RDF model of all the COVID-related data that the WHO wants to collect. That is in RDF. And for every semantic type, we have chosen a thesaurus, for example, UMLS for diseases, UniProt for proteins, and so on. That's a choice that the community made. But obviously, if you want to use the human phenotype ontology to refer to diseases, and it's properly mapped to UMLS, we still know what you mean. So even there is already flexibility, but there is a FAIR implementation profile soon be published in VODAN, which gives you the choices the community made so far in terms of thesauri and vocabularies.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether Professor Van Rysel wants to add anything else.
Am I on? I can just confirm that we are working from the basis of the COVID report form of the WHO, and that the semantic model has been made on the basis of that form in RDF, and that is what we are using. So yes, thank you.
Perfect. So there are no more questions now posted on the chat, and I think we are also reaching 3 o'clock. So personally, from my part, I really want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank Philips Foundation, and GoFair and CODATA for supporting us. And I hope we can keep this collaboration going. And Milan, if you want to say also a few closing words, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. So I would also like to thank the speakers. So thank you very much for the time, the effort, and for the sharing of very interesting initiatives. I would also like to thank the audience for attending this webinar. Interesting questions, and definitely I agree that let's try to work together. There are interesting future initiatives in Europe where we all need to work together, including all the Gaia X and all the other things next to what we presented today. So I'm looking forward to interesting future.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all participants. All the materials will be distributed online, so you all will get an email with link to all the materials. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.